Good evening. I would like to ask everyone to please remain muted at all times. As this meeting is being recorded also, for privacy reasons, you are advised to leave your cameras off. Now, our meeting is being held across lands of many Aboriginal peoples and nations, and I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners thereof. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. The Rumbum Health Care Campus is a 1,000-bed world-class teaching hospital based in Haifa. The patient population is diverse, as Rumbum is the major referral medical centre for all of northern Israel, serving more than 2 million residents and others referred from all over Israel, the Mediterranean region, and around the world. Rumbum is respected internationally for all its clinical services and innovation in medical technology. We've heard of the underground emergency hospital at Rumbum, which was founded in response to lessons learned during the Second Lebanon War to ensure the protection of our patients and medical workers. Today, this building has been transformed from a parking garage into the largest COVID-19 treatment centre in the country in order to fulfil the rising national demand for extra dedicated treatment space. The Australian Friends of Rumbum Circle of Health program is linked to Rumbum Healthcare Campus, bringing cutting-edge technologies and information which can help thousands of citizens in Australia. The Circle of Health program is advocating disease prevention and social well-being in Australia by utilising local experts and experts from Israel, in particular from the Rumbum Healthcare Campus. We have also facilitated flagship research collaboration between Rumbum Healthcare Campus and Australian medical research institutions. Now, please consider supporting this important program so that we can continue to bring important knowledge to our community and support Rumbum Hospital in Haifa, the largest hospital in northern Israel. Now, I'd like to express my gratitude to our guests, our great speakers, as well as to our partners, the Israeli Embassy in Australia, and to Rumbum Healthcare Campus. A special thanks to Inbar Shahaf. I would also like to acknowledge Mr. Ron Gerstenfeld, Deputy Chief of Mission at Embassy of Israel in Canberra, who is here with us tonight, and our board members and Honorary President, Professor Mary Louise McLaws. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in during the webinar using the Q&A option at the bottom of the screen. And I'm looking down the bottom of the screen. There's actually no Q&A. You have to use the chat, I would suggest, for posing your questions. And would you please welcome our moderator for tonight's webinar, Dr. Adir Shiffman. Adir is an Australian serial tech startup founder, investor, and executive chairman of global athlete and analytics leader Catapult Sports. He has been rated the world's 10th most innovative person in sports business. After qualifying in medicine and practicing as an MD, Adir made the switch across to startup founder, and over the last decade launched, built and sold more than a dozen high-growth tech companies. Adir also writes a column each Tuesday in the Australian Financial Review. So I'll hand over to you, Adir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, David. It's a pleasure to be back hosting another one of these Rumbum sessions. And I also want to acknowledge that, like ML, I saw that and heard that you've just become president of Australian Friends of Rumbum, and I wanted to say how fantastic that is. Obviously, you're a participant on the last discussion about COVID, and it's fantastic to see you on board the organisation. So, yeah, wonderful. So tonight, or this evening, we have a very, very interesting conversation. So I'm going to be speaking to Professor Eytan Blumenthal. So Professor Blumenthal is the head of ophthalmology at Rumbum Hospital. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, but and let me, sorry, just to reiterate, if you could mute your microphones through the course of this this evening, And ideally, you can even turn off your cameras because it's being recorded and you might not like the privacy implications of your face being recorded. That's also fine. So let me tell you a little bit about Professor Blumenthal. So as I said to you, he's the director of the Department of Ophthalmology at Rambam Healthcare Campus. He graduated, of course, with honors, no surprises, from the Faculty of Medicine at the Hebrew University Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem. And after completing his ophthalmology residency at Hadassah University Hospital, he continued to specialize in glaucoma at the Charlie Eye Institute at UCSD, one of the top glaucoma institutes worldwide. He specializes in the treatment and surgery of difficult glaucoma and cataract cases. And these patients are referred from all over the country and also from outside Israel. And Professor Blumenthal's major research interests obviously include glaucoma, but also diagnostic technology in glaucoma and developing diagnostic and surgical devices. So as the Director of Ophthalmology at Rambam Healthcare, Professor Blumenthal leads a team of experts in all fields of ophthalmology. Patients choosing Rambam's ophthalmology department will find professional, skilled and compassionate staff and utilize cutting-edge technology. So now you know the formal bits about him, but the informal bits are going to be much more interesting because we're going to have a very wide-ranging discussion about COVID things, about cutting-edge technology in the treatment of various different eye diseases, and also in some of the incredible programs that Eytan oversees as part of the Rambam fellowship program. So firstly, Eytan, welcome and nice to speak to you again.
Thank you very much.
It's really a pleasure.
It'll be nice to conduct this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, it's good to have you here. And I thought we would start with something that I'm sure everyone in Australia is interested to know about. And that is, from your perspective at Rambam, how are things going in Israel with COVID? Where does the country find itself at the moment? Give us a bit of an insight.
Okay. First of all, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or next month, just like the rest of the, but based off the fourth wave, some call it the third wave, it's going down.
Rambam has this underground car park that was built as a consequence of the Second Lebanon War to be secured from biological and chemical warfare, and it provides a safe environment inside. And so I don't see him back yet, but he'll let us know when he comes back. And so he was talking about, and I won't steal his thunder because I'm hoping he'll be back, is he was talking about the way in which that car park, which can be incredibly transformed in 24 hours into an ICU ward, which is quite remarkable. I think it's $1 billion build. So he was talking about how that was transformed into a COVID ward and some of the very interesting challenges that it posed because it was COVID rather than external attacks. And so I'm not going to steal his thunder, but that can be the cliffhanger of what I'm saying. And hopefully he'll come back and fill in the pieces of what the key challenge is there.
Adir, can you hear me?
Oh, that's great. I can hear you. I can't see you. I'll take voice over nothing. That's perfect.
Okay. In fact, the video is on. Let's see if you see me.
You'll probably be somewhere in my participant list, but
yes, we can see
you're there. We can see you.
Great.
Excellent.
Okay. So I just gave a little bit of a background. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So I just gave a bit of a background about the underground car park and it's a secure facility, etc. But I didn't tell people the way it was transformed for COVID and what one of the key issues was. So I'm going to throw that back to you and you're going to tell that story. So we know that it exists. We know that it's for biological and chemical warfare, and we know that you decided to transform it for COVID. So tell us a little bit about that transformation and tell us the key challenge you faced that was kind of the opposite to the normal problem that room was set up for.
Okay, so I'll say it again, presuming that I wasn't heard the last time. First of all, a curiosity, when the underground hospital was built for chemical, atomic, and biological warfare, it was obvious that all the filters and the mechanisms were to keep bad things out. So the filters were protecting the people inside from the rest of the world. But with COVID, it's the other way around. You need to protect the rest of the world from people who have COVID. And suddenly all the filters were the wrong way and weren't doing their job. And there was a lot of engineering and technological work to reformat the underground hospital to keep the bugs inside. It's an amazing underground hospital. During peace, it serves as a parking lot. And we always joke that every car has its own oxygen, suction, and electricity. But in 24 hours, it can be switched into a full-scale hospital with an emergency room, an area for giving ICU, and even a full functional operating room, which is just amazing. It's probably the largest in the world, or at least one of the two largest in the world. And people from all over the world come to us to see what it's like. It worked, but it was hell, because to be hospitalized in a large parking lot is not anywhere near the freedom of being hospitalized in a department, but still it did a job. And right now, as I said before, the number of hospitalized patients has dropped from 750 to 550, and we hope that this drop will continue. So right now, we're optimistic here in Israel.
I mean, that's fantastic news. And the other thing you were saying, that I know what you were saying that people didn't quite hear, is so you have the filtration challenge of a hospital car park ward that is designed to keep stuff out, but now you want to keep stuff in, so to speak. But you also raised an issue which I had never thought of before, and I'm sure that very few people who are tuned in have thought about this, which has to do with the masks and the way in which the masks are used. And so you should repeat that and tell us about that as well.
Okay. In general, the mask is not symmetrical. You can wear it both ways, and it either protects you from the world or protects the world from you. When you're a surgeon, you want to protect the world from you. You don't want to infect the patient. When you're immunosuppressed, like a oncology patient, you want to protect yourself from the world. Now, there's a philosophical question: what happens in COVID? Which way would we want to place the mask? And the answer is that for technical reasons, it's better to place the mask where you're protecting the world from yourself, which means all those microscopic droplets that contain virus particles should be stopped inside your mask rather than placing it the other way around. And I don't know if you guys have seen masks with filters, which were common initially, but they are like the worst. So they're no longer used for COVID.
Right.
Because of these same issues.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I think, some of the masks that are being used around various parts of Australia, especially in Melbourne and Sydney now, are not filtering anything irrespective of which way you use them. So, but definitely the surgical masks, the point is well taken that those are most effective when they're worn the right way. And so I want to move to something completely different before we come back to medicine and ophthalmology. And that is because, while you were struggling with some internet challenges, somebody suggested to speak to you in Hebrew, and it put a smile on my face because I thought your English may well be better than any of our English, but in fact, your background and how you grew up is very unusual. And so, I should add before I ask you this, if people have questions, just put them in the chat. I'm looking regularly and I'll add those questions into the discussion. And don't forget to mute because someone's coughing and not muted. But tell us a little bit about where you were born and how you ended up there. And you have a bit of an Australian connection as well.
Oh yeah, certainly. I'm partial Aussie. The story is that my father was in economics. He passed away and he had an academic career. And I was born in Japan when he was doing his PhD. He actually wrote his PhD in Japanese characters, which to me is not understandable.
Incredible.
Yeah. And I spent some time in the US, and then I came back to Japan and eventually landed in Australia and actually had my bar mitzvah in the Canberra JCC. But as a kid, 13 years old, I thought Canberra was a wonderful place. I know that you guys don't share that belief.
When you're 13, Canberra is the perfect size.
Yep. And one of my bad aspects of having my bar mitzvah in Canberra is that the presents I got were tons of beautiful books with photos and like half a dozen boomerangs. So that's my bar mitzvah present.
That's a great bar mitzvah present. I think mostly now, I think it's predominantly money, but at least you got your 6 boomerangs.
Okay, so I'm still 4th generation from Jerusalem, Israeli, and I think many Israelis in my generation are multinational. English is very common in Israel. Just about everyone speaks English. These days they pick it from the internet, my kids. So if any of you come to Israel, you'll really feel at home. You open the telly, do the same programs and so forth.
And so what does that mean? 4th generation Jerusalem, who came to Jerusalem and where did they come from? Because, that's an unusual situation in itself in a country that's, is a little, 75 years old, 73 years old, like that's unusual. How did they end up there?
My grandmother and grandfather were lucky enough to leave Germany, the German-Polish border, just prior to the war. And they were lucky, and there's a lot of them in Israel because the ones who didn't leave aren't with us anymore, most of them, except for those who survived the concentration camps. So they came to Israel with the parents of my grandmother. So that makes me 4th generation. And they lived like 5 people in a two-room, a 1-bedroom apartment, and my grandmother, who was a very privileged a teenager in art school, eventually became a hairdresser because she thought this was the only art-related profession that she could make a living off. So times were hard in Israel. Yeah. Now times are wonderful, even internationally, but we still have these heritage stories that we carry.
Absolutely. I mean, now, not only are times not like that anymore, but Israel really, as we all know, is the startup nation, and it's at the cutting edge of technology and innovation in a lot of different ways. And, COVID has created an interesting opportunity because a lot of modalities that were understood to be either very difficult or would face a lot of resistance from patients or the profession, COVID has accelerated a lot of that. And I know that you actually published a paper that was looking specifically at telehealth and how different types of telehealth could be used from an ophthalmological perspective, potentially to, I guess, assist in diagnosing the patient at home would be part of my guess. And it would be great to hear about a bit of that and whether you think, how that's been accelerated by COVID and how the world will be different in ophthalmology as a result of all of this COVID and telehealth type of thing.
So I'll say a few things. First of all, going back to Corona, you should know that Israel is perhaps the most vaccinated country in the world. Half the country has already received the 3rd injection, which in the United States was only FDA approved just recently, and only, I believe, over 60 or 65. So we are way ahead of everyone else, but way ahead is not necessarily good. We are sort of like in a entire country scientific experiment. And that is, first of all, a little frightening. But on the other hand, I think it's a source of honor and feeling good.
Absolutely.
Because I think the literature is now, the best journals, the New England and so forth, are full of articles coming out of Israel and solutions are coming out of Israel. So when the discussion about the 3rd injection was raised, probably most of the data discussed was data coming out of Israel. And we have faith in the injections. I think everybody should be vaccinated. My kids have been vaccinated. And we hope that our psychological and economical welfare will return to normal. Now talking about telemedicine, ophthalmology is one of the professions that is most difficult to do telemedicine is because everything is microscopic and it's not easy to conduct an examination from far away. And still technology is so incredible these days that it's becoming possible to look at the eye, the inside of the eye, to take pressure and so forth, when you instruct the patient who has to be part of what's going on. And I believe very much in telemedicine. I want to say that the hurdles or the barriers to telemedicine are not telemedicine and are not technological, are not even medical. I see two barriers to telemedicine. One is the medical legal issue, needing to be medical legally in charge and liable for something that is obviously less than the real thing, which is a face-to-face exam. And the other aspect is billing or a financial business model. Because how do you quantify one examination and then 17 phone calls, half of them using Zoom? How do you get reimbursed? How does the patient pay and so forth? This is very new, and the system doesn't still or yet know how to conduct it or how to quantify it. I think as soon as these two hurdles are solved, we're going to see lots more telemedicine. I'm all in favor of it.
I mean, we've seen a lot of, and you know, whoever, please, if you don't have your Zoom on mute, please put it to mute. We've seen a lot of dermatological diagnosis, for example, using an iPhone or similar, because the quality of camera has improved so dramatically. You know, when you're thinking about ophthalmologic telemedicine, what type of setup does the patient need to have for you to have any effectiveness at all with it?
We now have cameras that can look in the inside of the eye, can actually photograph the retina with a little addition that you put on your cell phone. So that already exists. There's many competing companies for the best product. We're looking into home tonometry, devices that can take or measure your pressure in the eye. That's for glaucoma and for the general well-being, knowing that your eye is healthy. And you can certainly look at the outside of the eye with even a cell phone. So I'm optimistic. It's not as good as the real thing, what we have in the doctor's office. It's called a slit lamp. But I think it can complement in many ways the normal exam, especially after the first one. The downside of telemedicine is that in glaucoma, for instance, in my disease, probably compliance, the patient actually taking the drops that they were prescribed, doesn't go anywhere above 50 to 70%. And this is when a doctor that usually you trust and believe in, you've shaken their hands, is instructing you to do. And I wonder, what is the compliance going to be when a machine is going to tell you to do A or B? If a machine is going to tell you, you need surgery, come next week and we'll have it done. Maybe it'll decrease. My feeling is that it will decrease, but time will tell.
That's interesting. Well, you know, when social media tell people to do the ice bucket challenge, millions of people around the world poured cold water over their heads. So maybe we can be hopeful about compliance improving when it comes out of a machine or something. And so when you think about, you know, when you're talking about telemedicine and you think about patients in 5 or 10 years' time, do you think that this is going to be a trend that's going to be to continue? What do you think it looks like in, you know, you consulting with patients in 5 or 10 years' time? You know, how do you think about, I guess, the percentage or the amount of face-to-face consultation that will be able to be done via telehealth? Do you think the first diagnosis will be done via telehealth of a lot of diseases?
In many ways, yes. Let me say that our world is moving to a world where you want everything right now. So people want to talk to their president right now. People want to get an answer right now. If you don't answer to an email after 2 hours, people think you're maybe hospitalized or not.
You might be dead, exactly.
Or dead, exactly. So I think this is going to happen also in medicine. People are going to expect to ask the doctor a question and get an answer, and it's not going to be in the appointment 3 months from now. So this is certainly going to happen because there's going to be a huge public demand, and we're going to be 24/7 hijacked by this, which really happens to lawyers and teachers, and you know,
Definitely.
the teacher, the mother can call the teacher, and right now she's going to want to speak to the teacher. So this is going to happen in medicine, and this is going to be a telemedicine oriented. Hopefully it'll be in text and all in real life, so you can sort of still have some time to yourself. But an enormous amount of work is going to happen in telemedicine and also in bots, in computer programs. So for instance, just to give you a small example, if you have diabetes, then you may tell the machine, this is what I measured, 275, and the machine is going to tell you what to do. There won't even be a person involved. You can call it telemedicine or computerized artificial intelligence.
AI,
but
basically. Yeah, absolutely.
I believe we're moving to that direction, and the answers are going to be good. They're going to beat in randomized trials. It's going to beat what physicians, flesh and blood, are going to be able to say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, it's another area that Israel can lead the world, because already it leads the world in innovation and technology, and has the potential to lead the world in a lack of patience in the speed of responses coming back as well. That's also an Israeli specialty. So, I think that's interesting. Now, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm going to try not to turn this into a series of personal consultations for the people on the Q&A, but I'm going to ask a broad question, because, there's quite a lot of questions being asked about cataract. So I'll touch on it and you can answer it relatively briefly, but I think this is a good indicative question. Someone that's born today with, let's say, congenital cataracts, how do you think about how the world has changed for someone like that today versus 20 or 30 years ago?
Okay, a congenital cataract is very rare. We see in our department maybe 10 patients a year. It's a very rare disease. It needs to be operated, and results are improving. But I want to focus on the elderly cataract, the one that,
yes, even better.
And I'm going to say a few statements that may sound to you controversial or dramatic, but I believe they're true. Number one is, everybody is going to get a cataract if only they live long enough. So at 100, 120, practically 100% of the population will have a cataract. Number two is, the more safe this procedure is, the earlier it's going to occur. And what do I mean? When cataracts gave you a 5 or 10% chance of seeing, people would say, let's first lose all our vision, and when we don't see anything, we have nothing to lose. And then cataracts were done. And if you had a 5% chance of regaining vision, then, it's like a bonus because you didn't see anything. Right now, when the surgery is maybe 95, 98% successful, people are willing to undergo the procedure, and consequently, doctors are willing to offer it at a much earlier stage. So right now, the cutoff is driving, which means if your vision is such that your driving license is at risk, we will offer cataract surgery. Some people will want to wait more, some people will want to wait less, but this is like the median or the average. This is not because we value driving, it's because we believe that procedure is safe. If the procedure becomes much safer, we can do a cataract procedure as a refractive procedure. We put a lens inside, the lens has a sphere, also has a cylinder component, and we can basically negate your glasses, give or take half a diopter or 1 diopter at most. So basically, if cataract is deemed much safer than it is now, you're going to have your surgery done and you won't wear glasses. Number three is people at 45, when they start needing reading glasses, there are ways to help with that. So we may see everybody at 45 getting cataract, at least those that want it. So it's an interesting concept. It happens in all of medicine. It happens with implantation of teeth. It happens with hip replacement. Some people would say today, I can't jog anymore, I want to have my hip replaced. This was absurd 50 years ago. I mean, you can walk, why would you want to have a hip replacement? But right now, I can't jog, I want it replaced. And it's going to get a more and more early or even preventive treatment so that people don't lose any of their quality of life. Same with bariatric surgery. At one time, if you could fit in a airplane seat, you weren't a candidate for bariatric, for weight loss surgery. Now, the numbers are increasing and people are willing to do it because we learned that it's not just a cosmetic or something to do to help you socialize, but it's also healthier not to be
Absolutely.
overweight. So
Absolutely.
these are trends that we see in cataract, we see in other professions. You should know that the safest surgery in all of medicine is refractive surgery. It has the lowest number of complication rate, even though every complication is painful because it's a cosmetic procedure. And the second safest procedure is cataract. So we do very safe procedures.
You've got the top two.
Yep, but it's like anesthesia. When everybody believes that anesthesia 100% of the time goes well, then the most you can do is give people what they already think is obvious or
Yes,
normal.
that's right.
If you don't succeed, it's terrible. So it's not always good to be a physician of something that works almost all the time, but that's the reality, and we're striving to keep it that way.
That's the curse of high expectations, right? It's much easier to be successful when you keep the expectations very low. The patient didn't die on the table, success. It's much easier to, easier doctor life. I'm going to touch on one more thing before we move to another topic, and I'm conscious of time and I keep welcoming questions, but you talked about, the potential for 45-year-olds and deteriorating eyesight. And obviously, as people get older, a lot of people suffer a deterioration in their eyesight called presbyopia, where the eyes effectively become less effective at reading from short distances. And I know that we were having a conversation about a very non-invasive approach, potentially, to at least delaying the onset of presbyopia. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. First of all, a concept that is intriguing or interesting. We have two eyes, and most people, the refraction is quite symmetrical. If we could have one eye for distance and one eye for near or for computer, in many ways, that would be like putting two blankets that can't cover the feet and the head of the patient or the person, but we place them in a way that the two blankets together cover from head to toe. So one concept is to work on this duality of eyes and make them not exactly overlap. But coming back to your question or your topic, we were part of a very large or very interesting study. We were the largest recruiter for drops to fight against presbyopia, the need for reading glasses. And the concept is an optical concept. If you shrink the pupil small enough, your depth of field increases and you can actually see better for near, even if you needed glasses before. That doesn't solve the problem, but apparently people from 45 to 55 can avoid reading glasses using this combination drop, and it will work around 6 to 8 hours. So if you put it just when you arrive to work, it should hopefully cover your workday, depending on your profession, of course. And it's an intriguing option. And I think we're going to see it on the shelf probably in the next few years.
That's remarkable. So there's something there's a couple of things I really want to talk about because there are so many fascinating topics with you. And so I want to move from like the very small to a much bigger, conceptually at least. And that is, the way in which you approach the training of your ophthalmologists, which is very remarkable. And it involves, I would say, maybe Indian villages that are virtually in poverty. And it's a heartwarming and very smart combination at the same time. So, tell us a little bit about that process, because that is very intriguing.
Okay. I initiated a project which I'm very proud of, and my residents love it. It's almost the most fun month they will ever have professionally. And the idea is that each one of my residents flies to India for a month. Right now with the COVID, we've had trouble, but we want to initiate or ignite it again on December, because India is no longer a red country, but an orange country, based on our scale. And the idea is that the resident flies to India, pays a lot of money, especially in Indian proportion, and they will do around 60 cataracts themselves. They will learn to operate. They may have done 10 or 20 in Israel prior to flying. And during this time, they have a one-on-one coaching from one of the best cataract surgeons that I've ever encountered. Not just a wonderful cataract surgeon, but also a wonderful teacher with thousands and thousands of surgeries and hundreds of students. And the deal is, this is an Indian person who was fighting for patients and for money and for fame and for quality of life. And one day said, I want to throw it all away. And I want to do something good for my people and live an okay life. And what he did is he closed his clinics and he said, I'm going to charge ophthalmologists from all over the world, and they're going to pay my salary and the cost of the surgery. And I'm going to offer free cataract surgery to the poorest of the Indians in the villages. And when I say poor, I mean people who don't have the money to buy shoelaces for their old pair of shoes that they may have picked up somewhere in a garbage bin. And these are the patients that we operate, and they get the best possible surgery because he wants to train and we want to be trained in the Western way of doing cataract with the most modern machines. So this is quite an expensive endeavor, and the residents raise the money by moonlighting after hours during the residency, especially doing Avastin injections. And once they have raised the several $1,000s of cost, they fly to India, and when they come back, they're basically independent cataract surgeons. And then they start learning way more, and they graduate our program among the best in the country as far as cataract surgery, and with a big smile on their face.
I mean, it's like the perfect symbiosis of the developed world and the developing world, where there are like tremendously positive outcomes for everyone at the professional level, at a personal level. I mean, you know, the emotional and personal development, I imagine that those doctors the trainee ophthalmologists experience. I mean, you know, that's an experience of a lifetime, and the perspective that it provides them with, they couldn't have it professionally or personally inside Israel. It's really remarkable. Now I'm going to ask you, now, since we've gone down that road, I'm going to go down, we're just going to keep going through curves and something totally different. I've got a question. I don't know how you're going to answer this. Can damage to the optic nerve be reversed? There's your question.
And the answer is, at present, no, with very, very rare exceptions. For instance, if you got hit in your eye, there may be reversible optic nerve damage just because the trauma has the element of edema that is reversible.
Swelling, basically.
Swelling, yeah. And in multiple sclerosis, optic neuritis, there may be an element of reversibility. But in general, and especially in glaucoma and in long-standing optic nerve damage, there's no way we can fix it. And therefore, preventive medicine and catching diseases early is so important.
Mm-hmm. And another question, which I'm going to give an answer and then you give an answer, and your answer will be better than mine. Because the question is, when somebody takes, you know, the measures the pressure in your eyes, how do we know that they've done it correctly? My answer is blind faith is the answer to that question, but you might have a better answer to that question.
Okay. Number one, I agree, but I'll tell you where this misconception comes from. Our pressure in the eye changes from hour to hour and certainly from day to day. So if my pressure was 15 today and 20 or 18 tomorrow, it's not the person and it's not the machine. Your pressure fluctuates. And every time a patient argues with me, my canned answer is, if we knew that the pressure was the same every time, why would we even bother measuring it? So let's not measure it today, since you think we already know what it is. And obviously that's not the case.
Absolutely, that's a good answer.
You know that even though you get a number like 18 or 19, and 19 sounds like more than 18, that's not true. Because the variability of the measurement is ±2. And plus minus means, if you know a little bit statistic, 2 standard deviations, 15 may be 19 and maybe 11. And that's still within the variability of the measurement process. That's not even the changes between one day to the other. So when you take this into consideration, then we're measuring okay. That's not where the money is.
Yes.
The money is in the fact that pressure changes from one day to the other, and certainly from one visit to the next.
Oh, that's interesting. So basically, really when an ophthalmologist or a clinician is measuring pressure, they're looking for large changes in pressure or unexpected changes in pressure, not minor fluctuations within the confidence intervals of the technology. So I think that's a great point to make. So those were our interlude questions, but now we're going to get back to, I asked a question about Israelis traveling abroad to get training, but there's also the reverse that goes on that you're involved with, and that is bringing Palestinians and, of all people, Mexicans, is that right, into Israel and bringing them in and around your world. So, tell us that, the flip side of now people coming to you.
Okay. When I was a resident at Hadassah, we had an international program initiated years ago, and we had residents from all over the world, from Cameroon, from Ethiopia, from Mexico, from Guatemala, from anywhere you can think of, Albania. And it was fun. It was fun for two reasons. First of all, it was a very multi-language, multicultural experience. And number two, there were more people carrying the load. So as a resident, we weren't 7 residents, we were 14. And when you have more residents, the residency becomes more diversive and more interesting and more profitable as far as advancing professionally, getting more out of your residency. And when I became chairman in Haifa at Rambam, I decided to open a similar program. I don't have the patent on it like I have on the Indian experience, but we right now have a lot of physicians coming over from the Western territories. We'd also we have open doors to people from Gaza, but for political safety reasons, that border is shut. So
and
they
by
can't
the Western
come
territories, you mean like there's a Palestinians who live in the West Bank that are coming into Israel?
Yep. Real Palestinians, Hebron, Ramallah, Palestinians living in the West Bank. And they do a full residency. They're treated just like any other Israeli resident. And they're very hardworking. In fact, I don't know if you guys know that Jews in the world were the hardworking minority. Right now, Palestinians are becoming hardworking minority.
That's interesting.
And you can see this concept in the United States. At one time, the WASPs, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, were the doctors and the lawyers, and now you find them in business, in banking. They don't want to do a PhD in chemistry anymore. And then there were the Chinese, and now there's the Indians, and it's the minorities that have to work hard and prove, because nothing is served on a silver spoon.
Silver platter, yeah.
Silver
Absolutely.
platter. Right now, we're very happy of our Palestinian residents because they've learned the language and ophthalmology very well, and they're some of the most hardworking residents that we have. Why Mexico? Because one brings the other. There's a rumor in Mexico that Israeli ophthalmology is very worthy of coming and learning the language. It's not easy, and participating in, and one brings the other. We're open to residents from all over the world.
That's fantastic. And I think, one of the nice things about all of these Rambam conversations that we have is it's a hospital that is in a mixed part of Israel, and it's an integrated hospital with Jews and Arabs. And there are always these type of stories that are really part of the fabric woven into Rambam as an organization. And every time we have these discussions, there's, some wonderful story of coexistence and hope that is just essentially part of the hospital, which is really fantastic. Now, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, I want to finish up with asking you this question, and it's kind of a prediction for the future from you, okay, which is, when you look forward and you look at ophthalmology in 10 years' time, you talked a little bit about AI, but what are some of the things that today are very problematic or very bad that you hope will have had some kind of solution in a decade's time, in the same way that macular degeneration used to be, a prescription for blindness in the past, and now, there are some measures available. What are you hopeful about in a decade's time will have major advances?
Okay. Number one, I want to break a misconception maybe I'm not doing myself justice, but I want to break a misconception. Medicine as it is right now today is wonderful and can solve most things. People who sit down and believe that something that will be invented next week, next month, or next decade is what we're missing to be better doctors or get better treatment as patients, in my opinion, is wrong. When I see a glaucoma patient, a macular degeneration patient, a cataract patient with a bad outcome, very often is because they came late. It was a delayed diagnosis or delayed referral or a not understanding that earlier treatment will lead to better outcomes than late treatment. That is especially true about glaucoma because it's an entirely irreversible disease. When it comes to cataract, except for the very latest stages, we can still reverse the process. But if somebody is age 60 and for 15 years they've had bad eyesight, and now you're going to fix their cataract and give them 10 years of good eyesight, they've lost 15 years of bad eyesight. You can't give it back to them, even though you can fix the cataract. And what if they come at 89 and they're going to live till 90? So, and I think the biggest challenge we have right now in medicine is to be able to provide the treatment correctly as early as possible. I think that's true in diabetes, it's true in hypertension, it's true with cholesterol, it's true with just about any chronic disease that I can think of. In some diseases, we don't have solutions right now. In Alzheimer, there's not a lot going on. In some psychiatric diseases, we can do a lot, but hopefully medicine will be able to do more. But again, in every arena I can think of, it's early diagnosis. And very often patients are reluctant to go, they're reluctant to trust their social medicine services. And I always say, people call me and say, you know, I want to go to a private doctor. And I tell them, first of all, go to your HMO doctor, get diagnosed. They will send all the tests. They will figure what you need. They will start treatment. And then if you still want, go to the expert and they will do the fine tuning.
Absolutely.
Don't come to them before you even did the blood tests because it's too early. So I urge everyone, and I talk about the fact that you gotta come early, you gotta find the diseases early. Apparently screening doesn't work as well. Screening programs, when you're completely healthy, they don't solve the problem. The issue is the earliest time, when your car just starts to make a little noise.
Turn up when you've got symptoms, the earliest symptoms. I mean, I think that, you know, to be honest, that's a great place for us to wrap up, because at the moment, you know, close to half of Australia is in a lockdown of one sort or another. Believe it or not, hard to imagine from the other side of the world, but it's true. And one of the things that is suffering is people have a reluctance to go and get things checked out when they have the earliest signs of a problem. They're kicking the can down the road and saying, you know, when lockdown is over, when COVID is over, then I'll go and check it out. And, you know, there's a wave of problems waiting down the pipe to come through with later diagnosis and more advanced disease. So I think, you know, that's a fantastic place to wrap this up. It's been really wonderful to talk to you, Professor Eytan Blumenthal. It's really a wonderful conversation. Thank you for your time. And Vered, I'm going to throw back to you to close it out.
Okay. Thank you so much. I apologize if we didn't answer to all of the questions, but feel free. Maybe I can try to ask Professor Blumenthal in a later stage. So I would like to thank to our partners, the Israeli Embassy in Australia and Rambam Healthcare Campus, of course. Thank you to our speaker, Professor Eytan Blumenthal, and to our moderator, Dr. Adir Shiffman. And I hope to see you all on our next webinar with the psychiatrist, Dr. Mark Schiff from Delmont Hospital, and with the Dr. Eyal Fruchter, Director of Division of Mental Health at Rambam Healthcare Campus, and Dr. Yaniv Datan, Deputy Director, Pulmonary Division at Rambam Healthcare Campus. And they will speak about dealing with the post-COVID expectation, how we can adjust to the new reality. Hopefully it will be sort of post-COVID. And the webinar will be held on November 9th on Tuesday at 7 p.m. So thank you everyone for joining, and hope you will join the next event, I think, that's coming up.
And thanks again, Professor. That was wonderful.
Thank you very much, and cheers to you all.
Thanks, Professor Blumenthal.
Short.